going, guys? Matt with Motorworks here, and here I am driving in my Chrysler 300, and I'm also at the house. Alright, now I'm in both places today because there's stuff I want to talk about, and then there's dynos and stuff I want to talk about, but can't, you know, hold stuff up while I'm driving because number one, it's going to be too shaky for the camera, and number two, I'm pretty sure it's illegal to, you know, hold stuff up in front of a camera while I'm driving down the highway. Now, just as the title of this video states, we're going to be talking about the best modifications for you to do to your Chrysler 300. Now, this is kind of my list, so your list may be different. If you have a different idea in mind, feel free to drop a comment below on how you would modify your Chrysler 300. I'd love to hear, you know, what you would do or what you have done to your Chrysler 300, and maybe some of the power figures that you gained from yours with possibly the same mods as mine had. I am curious to see, you know, what you guys are getting power-wise versus what I have, to see if it's comparable in any way. So, yeah, I'd be very interested to see, you know, what you guys are getting out there power-wise. Let's start off with the very first modification I did to my car, and it's something I highly recommend you do with yours. It's get a handheld tuner or some type of tuning software for the car, whether it's HP tuners or, you know, there's a bunch of different companies out there, so, you know, there's plenty to choose from. I went with the handheld tuner. You plug it in, you put the flash tune in, or you upload the tune in, and then you unplug it and tuck it away in your glove box. You know, quick and easy. When I got it, it felt different. The second I put that tune in, the throttle was much more responsive. It just felt like a faster, peppier car. It really woke the car up, for lack of a better word. So it wasn't that much money. I think I paid about 300 bucks for mine, and that was retail. So you could probably even get it for less in Facebook Marketplace or somewhere out there secondhand. Somebody's maybe getting rid of their car. You know, you could probably pick that thing up for pretty cheap. Now here's what it made on the Dyno. Oh man, that car sounds so good going down the road. The first mod was the handheld tuner. Now to break it down, I'm just going to go over what the car made with the handheld tuner and what the car made stock. Now if we look at the dyno sheet here, we can see that the car made 355 horsepower and 333 foot-pounds of torque stock. Alright, so the stock number on this graph is the blue line. This line would be horsepower here, and this line would be torque there. And if we look, the car made pretty decent gains when we put the tuner on the car. Now at peak horsepower up top here, it only made about 2 extra horsepower. So if we look at peak horsepower, made about 357 over 355. So about 2 extra horsepower there. The torque was actually pretty impressive. It made about almost 10 more foot-pounds of torque. And you could see where it really picked up torque was through that middle RPM range there. So if we come down here and we look, so from about, I'd say about, from about 4,000 RPM to about 5,500, almost 6,000 RPM, you've got a pretty decent increase in torque. So not a bad gain for just buying a handheld tuner and uploading a tune in it. I mean, it literally, after I did all the updates, any of you that have a Diablo Sport tuner know, after you gotta do the updates first. But after I did the updates, I found that it took really very, very little time to get that stuff uploaded into the car, and you know, that's a pretty good gain, about a 9 foot-pound of torque gain, and in some spots on the curve, you know, you got almost 8 extra horsepower. So not a bad gain for the little bit of time and effort it takes to install that. Let's head back out to the car. On the dyno, it looks like it was less than stellar. Yeah, in some spots it picked up 9-10 horsepower, but in other spots maybe 2 horsepower. It did increase the torque, so I suspect they probably did mess around with the ignition a little bit, because it did pick up a little bit of torque on there. It's a noticeable amount, so that may be what you feel when you put that flash tune in initially, is that extra ignition timing. It just, for whatever reason, when you put that flash tune in, it does feel like a different car. So that's why it's the first modification I recommend. Now beyond that, pick your poison. If you get a good deal on an exhaust, if you get a good deal on an intake, heck, if you want to cut off the suitcase and the resonators and put mufflers in their place, you know, I think that any of those modifications are going to increase the power on this car. After I put the flash tune in, I then took it to the drag strip on some less than new tires. They weren't very sticky. Matter of fact, they like to do burnouts, and you know, it wasn't an optimal day to run. You know, whatever excuse else I could come up with for that day. But anyway, took it to the drag strip. Oh man, this is a good race. Woo! Went a 13.7 at about 103 miles an hour, so it was less than what the car was rated stock. I was the first time to the drag strip with a rear-wheel drive car, and I haven't really launched this car ever on the street, so it was kind of a learning curve. I think when I go back next time, I'll be better prepared. I'll probably have a better set of tires next time, so I expect this to run a much better time. I don't know what it's going to run, but I suspect it will run a better time next time I go to the track. Now the reason I say I expect it to run better is because of the next modifications I did to this car. Now what I was going to do is I was going to put on an intake, get it dynoed, put on an exhaust, get it dynoed, but it turns out it's expensive to keep taking your car back to the dyno to get it dynoed every time. And I didn't have that kind of extra money to take it to the dyno each time I put one little part on, so I just lumped everything together and I put the closed off air box, the Corsa air box on, and the thermal R&D 3-inch exhaust on, took it to the dyno with a 93 octane cold air intake tune. This is the result I got from doing that. Intake and the exhaust and the tune and the, no, I'm just kidding. With those modifications, I picked up a pretty substantial amount of horsepower. The max horsepower I made with the tune was 357 horsepower. That was with just the flash tune. With the exhaust and intake and the flash tune, I'm now at 379, almost 380 horsepower. And for torque, it was at 342 foot-pounds of torque, almost 343, and it went up to 380 foot-pounds of torque after the intake, exhaust, and the tune. And if we look at the graph here at horsepower, it's pretty much making power now, more power now, from 3,500 RPM all the way up through to redline. So it was definitely a big increase in airflow, and you can definitely tell that that car is restricted from stock. Now whether it's the intake or exhaust, I'm not quite sure, but there's definitely a restriction going on. And that's a pretty decent gain for just a bolt-on intake and bolt-on exhaust. I mean, even more impressive is this torque curve from, you know, 3,500 up, again, just makes a ton more torque, and it has a much fatter torque curve the whole way through. I mean, that's pretty substantial. At some spots, it's making, you know, you're almost making 40 more foot-pounds of torque at some spots in that curve, which is very impressive. So these are definitely modifications that you're going to feel. I would recommend kind of doing it the same way I did. Get the handheld tuner so you have the ability to modify your tune if need be. A tuner can go in and change settings that they need to change. It kind of future-proofs the stuff for more modifications. You have the ability to actually set the car up to best match those parts. So that would be the first thing I would get. All right, the next modification after the tuner, I mean, really, that's up to you. Either an intake or an exhaust. You just want to open this car up so that it breathes better, both inhaling and exhaling better. You want to get this car breathing better. So either one's good. If you're on a budget, you know, the intake is definitely going to be the cheaper option. You can also find those secondhand as well. People that, again, are getting out of it, or they've crashed their car and they're just trying to part it out. So you probably find an intake pretty cheap, and it seems like everyone's going to work. The main goal with the intake is that it opens up to more air volume. These Hemi cars love to breathe, so the more air you can get in and the better you can evacuate that air, the more power these cars are going to make. So that's just my 2 cents on it. I hope this video kind of helps you out in your selection, as well as seeing, you know, that it does actually make a performance difference by putting these parts on. That was the main focus of this video, is to show you that yes, it does make a performance difference when you start bolting on performance upgrades to these Hemi cars. And it's simply because they love to breathe. But that's going to do it for this video, guys. If you liked the video, as always, give it a thumbs up. I love to hear from you guys in the comments. Thank you for subscribing to the channel and helping it grow. But that's going to do it for this. We'll see you in the next video, guys.